everybody. Welcome to our fifth AMA. My name is Jerry from the Content Production Core Unit. Today, I'm joined by David Utrobin from
Hello.
the Proposed Governance Communications Core Unit. And we will be discussing David, his experience, as well as asking questions about the core unit itself. So, David, thanks for joining us. Do you want to give some intro about all of that stuff?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the brief intro, Jerry. My name is David Utrobin. I am being proposed as the facilitator and am the main person behind the actual proposal for the Governance Communications Core Unit. And today I'm here to answer questions from the community, which I could see from the call. There's only around 8 or 9 people here, but still, nevertheless, I think it's important just to be able to be here and to extend this opportunity out to the community. So we posted this a while ago, and now we're here today. So I guess, Jerry, what would be good to start with, like an explanation of just what GovComms is?
I think actually, if we can back up a little bit from that even and kind of start with your experience and why you wanted to propose the core unit in the first place.
Yeah, sure. So let me back up a second and get into me. So, I guess, like just in terms of educational background, I have a bachelor's degree in corporate communications with an English minor. I graduated from Baruch College back in 2016. So I've been out in my young professional life in the field doing stuff. And here are some of the things that I've done. So right out of college, I was an administrator for the master's program for arts administration at Baruch. So I was doing a lot of like operations stuff. We actually had to raise a lot of money. So I was involved in some fundraising efforts and securing grants and stuff like that. And then after that, I worked for about 2 years as an operations manager for an e-commerce startup that was actually a startup that my father had launched, and he needed help, and he does not know English too well. So he enlisted me. I built out our entire HR department. I created all of like the standard operating procedures. I was on the site every single day for those couple of years. And it was a really fascinating experience in terms of learning what it means to really be an operations manager and managing a team of like 6 or 7 people with pretty high turnover, since warehouse jobs are just lower end jobs with high turnover. And then while I was working as an operations manager, I was using my lunch breaks and sometimes my workday to browse Reddit and look for things to invest in. Not really just Reddit, but in general, I was growing in my ability to invest in things, and cryptocurrency really stood out to me. My whole story with how I got connected to crypto, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but basically the short story is that Andrew Bourbon, I met him at the gym, and he couldn't shut up about Bitcoin, and then I read the white paper. I had like that crazy aha moment that everybody has, and I started really loving and investing into Bitcoin. But then I found Ethereum. And once I realized what Ethereum was, I had that aha moment all over again. And I went down the rabbit hole into all of the early protocols and projects that were being launched back in 2017. So I've been so another context clue there. So I have been around for quite a while in terms of crypto years. I've been around since like late 2016, early 2017. So this brings us to MakerDAO and where I come into my story with MakerDAO. So after investing in Bitcoin and Ethereum, I found MakerDAO, and I also this is like before single collateral DAI launched. There was just like a white paper, and I read the white paper and I realized just how much potential this protocol had. And not only that, but I also realized that even before anything, this this white paper had way more, I guess, fundamental like business sense compared to other projects and protocols that I was looking to invest into. So I decided to invest not just my money, but also my intellect and my skills into Maker. And I wrote a couple of op-ed pieces really early on that got me noticed by Richard Brown, who actually pioneered the community development department at the foundation. And so once he got approval from the foundation to launch that department, I was his first hire. And I was very, very grateful to be rescued out of a dark New Jersey warehouse to this really great opportunity. And so for the last 2 years, I was doing community development projects, which involved a number of different things, both on the communication side and just generally on the community development side. So we worked on projects that we completely owned as a department. Like for example, the Meetup Grants program that was chiefly run by me. And then also we worked with like contributors in the community to form working groups and projects that we didn't necessarily own or were less involved in. But really, our goal was to try to grow out the DAO and grow out that community of freelance contributors and freelance stakeholders that wanted to work with us. And so that's what I was doing for the last couple of years. And then in May, I quit my job at the Maker Foundation, and I've been working on governance communications ever since. And this is a good segue because governance communications is something of an extension of community development. So, yeah, I guess I'm gonna pause there because I feel like I've been talking for like a good uninterrupted amount of time. So let me just pause there and sanity check, see if anybody has questions.
Absolutely. And yeah, everybody else on the call, please feel free to come on and ask questions if you have any. So I guess starting from there, like, what is it exactly that you see in terms of the extension from ComDev going into the governance communications core unit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one important aspect that people don't realize when it comes to scaling communities is actually like information access and communication practices. Because when you have a small community or a small company, it's really easy to kind of just get all your information peer to peer, or rely on whatever like default communication channels you have as an org. But when it comes to growing into like a really huge organization like MakerDAO is aiming to become, we are dealing with way more people, way more information, way more categories of information, way more categories of people. And so it's not as easy for the casual observer to really keep up with everything. It's hard to know where things are. It's hard to it's just really hard to get a grounding if you're approaching MakerDAO for the first time at this stage. And it's only going to get like worse in the sense that we're going to continue growing, and that information overflow is going to continue growing, and all of that is going to continue growing. And so what I see governance communications solving and really extending out of ComDev is being able to provide like a solution to those kinds of obstacles. We a part of what we do is we produce weekly Maker Relays, which is a publication that covers like it's basically like a one-stop shop for all the updates of what's happening at MakerDAO this week. Like that's just one example of the projects we do, and that helps that obstacle get alleviated, so to speak. And so yeah, a big part of it is being able to scale the community and make sure we could scale it in a way where everybody has access to the same information. Like you shouldn't have to really hunt so hard to find specific information. We should make that really easy for people. And so yeah, that's kind of one aspect of it. Well, the most important aspect in my mind.
Okay, so what about like the longer term vision for the team? Where do you kind of see it growing from after the initial startup phases and whatnot?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So I like in the mandate, our motivation, I'm just straight up reading from the mandate for just a second, but our motivation is to improve our performance as a public organization by removing those information and communication barriers, right? And so that's not just like current events and information about what's happening, but it's also beyond that. Like there's tons of public calls that happen that not everybody can make, right? So being able to produce written summaries in various formats for these calls is important. Likewise, there's a public calendar. Who manages that public calendar? It contains all the votes, and sometimes things change on the fly, and that has to be updated pretty quickly. And so, yeah, there's a public calendar aspect of what we do. Then there's the general organizational chart and stakeholder charting of the org. So this is a piece that I think is really interesting because MakerDAO, although it is not a traditional, public company in the sense it's like SEC, uh, regulated and has a stock in the stock market. Like no, like we are a global crypto protocol, and we have a public token MKR that anybody can buy in the world, that anybody in the world can use to vote. And so we are a pseudo public company. And with that, all of the core units are doing things transparently, right? Out in the open. Stakeholders are approaching us transparently out in the open. Like all of our business happens mostly transparently out in the open. And so a part of that is being able to map the organization. So, we should be mapping our voters, all the different like onions of our community. And actually, if you're interested, I could briefly show like an image, a draft of what that looks like our stakeholder map as a DAO. But in general, being able to map it out, being able to keep it updated, and being able to make it accessible to people that need it will greatly help the performance of the organization. Because if people know who's in charge of what and where, like that's great. So that's another piece of what we're doing. So we're mapping the org and we're creating like these infrastructure level like resources that just need to be kept updated and are really useful for people. And yeah, and then there's another piece of what we do, which is like not just producing content and upkeeping like a handful of services. It's also engagement. So right now we're actually looking for an engagement lead. But the idea is this: like MakerDAO has a number of different stakeholder groups, and each of those groups require or want or naturally different types of information. And so we are also envisioning a engagement lead or even a couple to really lead efforts in not just establishing relationships, but also producing like a feedback loop so that MakerDAO itself can improve in our information output and practices. So yeah, a big part of what our team intends to do is also engagement around information accessibility and around communications processes. And so yeah, that's another bit. Uh, and yeah, that's kind of like the 5-month view of the team. So there's all those resources, and then there's like a bunch of services. It's hard for me to say what the long-term vision for the team is. Like, ideally, we want to just continue solving these obstacles for people, and we want to continue to improve user experience around information at MakerDAO. And so, what that looks like a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, it's hard to say. But what it looks like now is way easier to describe. And so yeah, um, it's kind of all the stuff that's on the mandate. That's pretty much our short term, medium term goals.
Yeah, I want to just pop in and say, as these short-term goals really build up, and as we gather up more meetings with different teams, I think long-term goals are really going to start coming in.
Yeah, that's also very true. Like figuring out our working relationships with other core units, like actually content production, right, is also like definitely going to be weighing on what our longer term goals are and what they could be. But ultimately, our team is named governance communications, and that's not a typical like department at a typical company. Really, people, if you want like uh, an analogous type of department, you could think of organizational communications as our department. So we're not really concerned with marketing. We're not really concerned with even PR to an extent. We're more concerned about information um, that is essential to like the business activities that we do day to day.
sense. Peyton, I believe you had a question. Did you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing. Hey, David. So I was wondering kind of how you intend to like balance the different needs of different stakeholders, or perhaps more accurately, like how to prioritize them.
Yeah, I guess so. This is pretty hard for me to answer. So, like, I guess the way that I think of it is, what are things that we produce that are good for like the widest range of stakeholders possible? And that's kind of the lowest hanging fruit that, we have to work on, that we have to develop, that we have to make excellent. And then beyond that, there's like stakeholder specific communications and needs that we can begin to address. And it's not necessary that it's our core unit that they might need to address their problems. So it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to answer that question just from that level. But I guess like in terms of how we set priorities, yeah, I guess it's lowest hanging fruit, building into the more complex potential things that we could do. Yeah. I hope that kind of answers the question. And it's also going to be easier to answer that question once we have an engagement lead and think about the actual question for like a substantial amount of time.
So I got sorry.
Hey, Frank.
Yeah. So what's up, man? So I got a comment more than a question, or maybe it could be a question. So delegation is coming up, right? And you got delegates who are going to have to be informed with the many things that go on in the maker community, maker governance. One of the things I've heard was that for someone who's outside the community, yeah, they're still a maker community member because they hold MKR tokens, but they're not necessarily like you and I, David, here every single day, right? Checking in.
Very true.
So I was just wondering, like what kind of shortcut are you going to take to make it easier for someone, let's say someone who has a podcast and they're popular and, they know a lot of the VCs, so they're going to get some tokens allocated to them as delegates, as a delegate. And, how would you inform somebody like that to keep up with all the different changes, parameters and, discussions and, the forum is a great place to catch up on things, but, you got to definitely put in a good hour to catch up, right? And see all the discussions there.
100%.
And one of my favorite, to keep up with DeFi, one of my favorite guys is Darren Lau. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He runs the Daily Bear, sometimes called the Daily Bull when the market is doing well, but right now it's the Daily Bear. But he does a very nice job of just giving you like every single tweet of every event that happened 24 hours ago. So I was just wondering what's your thinking behind that, and how do we keep these delegates informed?
Yeah, I think our relationship with delegates as a DAO is going to be two ways. Like it's also going to be on the delegate to communicate with MKR voters and other stakeholders at MakerDAO. So it's definitely not like a one-way street. In terms of how we will be working with delegates, so in general, we do already track like current events at MakerDAO. So we have an idea of the different things that are going on. When it comes to delegates, and I guess also beyond knowing the things that are going on, we actively publish in a predictable way, a weekly update of current events and votes and everything, and also a monthly recap of all of it. So, for members of the media that just want to come in and get a quick snapshot, they will always have access to at least last month's data of what happened. And then they will also have access week to week, not just active votes, but also, the top 4 or 5 active headlines of what's happening with the top 3 or 4 current events or current issues that the community is mulling through, right? So when it comes to delegates, it's still kind of hard because we're not quite there yet in terms of producing content around them. But I think that MKR voters who are interested in delegating their MKR, what information they will need is what I'm thinking about. So we really would love a delegate interview like call series, which I actually know GovAlpha mentioned they're starting to set up. We would love to do issue discussion call series. That's also mentioned in our mandate. And that would involve potentially multiple delegates and also other stakeholders that might be affected by that issue. Also, we hope to get delegates to really work with content production too, to produce writing, to explain their stances, to really, be a good delegate. So yeah, to answer your question, Frank, it's kind of hard to tell now because it's still like, I'm kind of like in vision mode and we haven't done it yet. But I definitely think, delegates are gonna affect our content needs. They're gonna have a good impact on the way that we do things at Maker. So I hope that answers the question, and let me know if I missed any part of it. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Absolutely. And just circling to your proposal, the MIP 39C2 application, I noticed that you mentioned, and you might have discussed this earlier, I joined a little late, there's many contributors, right? So a lot of these contributors might be part-time.
Yes.
If you're a part-time contributor, you might dabble with different protocols. How do you, as far as your team, how are you going to protect against possibly a contributor, a part-time contributor, especially kind of putting their best interests in front of your team? So in other words, if I'm also doing part-time work for someone like Uniswap, is there something that you have in mind already? Have you thought about that?
In my mind, I don't think it's necessarily a conflict if they're working on other protocols as well. And actually, I think that that's an advantage because it might actually give rise to, protocol to protocol interaction that might be needed, right? Like I know, for example, MakerDAO has emergency shutdown, but we're not the only protocol with that kind of mechanism. And, our emergency shutdown, if it happens, affects several other protocols. And so I remember last year there was an effort to have a emergency shutdown cross-protocol discussion committee, but it kind of never really came to fruition. But at the same time, other protocols also have that, right? So like Aave, for example, has their security module that works similar, is like a derivative type of ES, and et cetera, et cetera. Like there will be protocol, things that happen at other protocols might affect MakerDAO and vice versa. And so I don't see it as necessarily a conflict that content writers or general contributors that work with us, I don't have an issue with that. And then on top of that, there's also to consider the way that we approach all of our individual products and things that we produce, right? So for Maker Relay, we have a very clear mandate not to be biased, right? Like we want to present both views. We want to present the truth and a balanced weighting of what the community is saying on both sides, right? So there's also that, we have an editorial and review process that looks out for undue influence, right? Like we don't want to influence MKR voters one way or the other. Our job is to maintain our integrity in the information that we present. And to present it fairly. And so even if somebody has an agenda and they're trying to add their little agenda subtly to the Maker Relay or something else that they might be helping us on, that should in theory get caught just by our quality assurance, so yeah, I hope that kind of answers it. And obviously we should be vigilant for any type of, I would say ethically questionable practice like that from any of our employees, not just our part-time contributors.
Cool, thank you. And last question, I don't want to check this call, but one of the first innovators I saw, me personally, somebody else doing it, when it came to using tools. I remember when you used to run your meeting, you used, I can't think of the name, but Paper Imperium is using now. Instead of Zoom. Yeah, Crowdcast. Yeah. And there probably were other people using it at that time, but I thought it was pretty cool that you were using Crowdcast. So when it comes to resources for your team, are there any tools that you're looking into right now?
Okay, I think the recording might have lapsed, but it started up again.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So
Okay, cool. But
any,
okay, so
any tools? Yeah.
to restate Frank's question really quickly, just in case like the recording got messed up or something. So the question was, in my experience at the foundation and projects that I've done around MakerDAO, Frank has observed that I love like switching up and trying and looking for great tools. And what tools is GovComms primarily thinking of using out of the gate? And so, yeah, I would say that it's kind of hard to tell. It's kind of hard to say because I do like Crowdcast, but I don't like. There's trade-offs to different tools and things that you use, so it really depends. I guess one thing that I could say to this is, as a core unit, our goal is also to do our work as efficiently as possible. So if we, for example, have 6 contributors, producing, summaries week to week of public calls, where we could have instead, 2 contributors and an AI software, like a note-taking software that we could tune up. Like, yeah, that's something that we're really interested in exploring because it'll save us, it'll save us in terms of financial costs for running our team, and also like, yeah, it just makes us more efficient, less reliant on people. So yeah, we are looking for tools that will effectively give us a lot more value for our buck, make us work more efficiently, and et cetera, et cetera. So that as a principle applies to the way that we're thinking about which tools we want to use. Then beyond that, I mean, we use a couple of things pretty consistently, like Grammarly, HackMD, even the GitHub project boards are not bad. But to be honest, it's pretty early stages. I haven't thought about what project management software, if any, we're going to use, or if we're just going to handle everything through our Google Drive on like a public or semi-public Google Sheet. So yeah, there's still some debate that's happening in my own head, and so yeah, it's kind of hard to answer. But we are looking for great tools, and if anybody has any, reach out. I would love to explore.
So kind of along those lines, what's the plan, I guess, for how you will track like your successes in terms of these services that you've been talking about, and beyond that as well, like what's your plan for transparency in terms of reporting it back to the DAO?
Yeah, great question. So there's a couple of things. So in terms of the team in general, we have a public Google Drive that will always be accessible to the public. It contains a number of different things in it. There are files in there that are private, like all of the individuals' invoices and like our detailed like line by line team budget. There is a public version of our team budget that will always be available and updated, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one piece. We have the public drive. The second piece is we are going to be working with Accountable for 100% of our team's accounting, spending, transactions, everything. So Accountable produces, financial reports, will be producing financial reports for our team, I believe quarterly. And if it's not, a problem, we will be posting those publicly as well. So all of our finances, we intend to be completely transparent with. All right, so that's that. So that's the team, big picture, finances, transparency. But then when it comes to reporting on our mandate, so items in our mandate, individual projects, et cetera, actually, Artem is here. He's one of the project managers that would launch with the team pending a passing vote, and he's slated to be the project manager for content and people. So his projects would include, governance, news, and reports. So taking that project as an example, it contains the weekly Maker Relay, and it contains a monthly governance review, and then it contains like a component to like explore the governance and news report space, the needs, the problems, etc. So how do you measure the success of this project, right? It's not like marketing where it's like the better the numbers, the more success. Like, no, that's not really how we measure the success of internal, like organizational communications pieces, because you're not necessarily going for numbers. You're going for full coverage of what's happening. You're going for minimization of mistakes. You're going for actively trying to like plug holes in. I guess it's hard. It's hard to really list them out just off the top of my head right now. But the way that we approach it in terms of like our general principle is we take a project like that and we ask those questions. What does it mean for it to be successful? How do we track it? How do we track our success? And then how do we present it at the end of the day or quarter or month to the people that are funding us, to the DAO, to Maker, right? To the people we work with and work for. And so yeah, that is going to be a matter of doing exactly that work. And as a facilitator, that's part of my job. I will be working with project managers to think through, document, and write out what it means for success in each individual project, what we should be tracking in each individual project, and how we present it and report it to the DAO as we go along. So yeah, that's all part of the game plan. And it really is, I guess, the short answer. It's really unique to the project. And it doesn't always mean numbers.
Yes, David and I just we've actually been talking about a workflow for tracking the metrics, and so we're trying to figure out like what are the best metrics to really put in and to track them for each project. And as soon as we get out there, as soon as we get all that information out there, you'll know.
Yeah. And also, it's like a two-way street. It's not just us putting stuff out there. It's also us engaging with other core units, the DAO. Like, what is required of us in terms of the information that the DAO wants to hear. So yeah, it's a mix of all that. And yeah, we'll definitely come to a more concrete execution of that. I don't know how to say it, but yeah, you guys get what I'm saying.
Hey, can I jump in with a question?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. So let's say another Black Thursday event occurs, something happens, an emergency shutdown is initiated.
Mm-hmm.
So, Black Swan event, something really bad happens. What role does GovComms play in those scenarios?
Yeah, sure. So actually right now we are in the process, but somewhat paused because we're not officially ratified yet. We're in the process of creating an emergency response MIP. So yeah, I guess, how do I explain this? So in an emergency, there's a number of different teams doing a number of different things simultaneously. So for example, PE is like, okay, what's the technical problem that happened? What are our solutions? What are the 6 different things that we could do? Like, they're in war room trying to figure things out. At the same time, GovAlpha, who are the coordinators of the governance process, are also scrambling, working with engineering teams, working with everybody to figure out, okay, what do we have to do? Like, what does redeployment look like? Does there have to be an exec that's launched? What kind of key decisions have to be made from the coordinators around the issue? So that's another piece. And then there's the communications piece. Okay, who's posting the forum threads? Who's moderating those threads? Who's summarizing the sentiment in the threads? Who's looking out for stakeholders that we didn't realize were affected? So there's a whole communications piece that happens during any crisis, and typically it is a company's PR team that handles those kinds of crisis communications. And so what our team is proposing is, not only are we working together to author this MIP of what the actual procedure is in the event of an emergency when it comes to communications, but also we would be the ones to actually, post the different forum threads, the discussion thread, and then the team updates thread. We would moderate it. We would cover it on all the communication side of things. So it's not like as as essential of a job as like what the PE team or GovAlpha are doing, but what we do enables them to worry a lot less about the communications piece because we're their point person. So we talk with PE, like they can obviously post all of the stuff themselves, but we're just there to help support the teams that are there by taking one thing off their plate, which is the comms piece.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. And also, just generally speaking, for that, we don't have a single project manager owning it. In fact, the facilitator technically owns that project, and when something happens, it's all hands on deck. So yeah.
So speaking of all hands on deck, you mentioned Artem already. Do you have any other team members already lined up for if you get ratified?
So at the moment, we are hiring and looking for an engagement lead. And actually, I can post the link for that job listing here. Yeah, so we're looking for an engagement lead at the moment. But besides that, we currently have between 6 and 8 part-time contributors who have been working with us for the last few months. We have a few new people too, but in general, we have a lot of part-time contributors working with us. So, for example, we have Mario, who is our Reddit moderator, who does a great job month to month. So we help manage him. And then we have a number of people working with Artem on the call summaries team, which is a team of contributors whose goal it is to just take the public calls and create written documentation about what happened in those calls for people that might not be able to join them, for historians, for whoever. And so, yeah, we have a lot of part-time contributors there. And so the launch of the team is going to include myself and Artem as the 2 full-time salaried employees, with a third to be hired very, very soon, also full-time salaried employee. And then the remaining 8 to X amount of people that will continue on working with us for the next year to whatever, they will continue to be part-time, continue to be paid in DAI if they would like. But they also will be able to get paid in fiat because we're being set up with Accountable, and that setup, will allow us to be able to get them to KYC and get them paid in other ways beyond just DAI, which is good. Yeah, it's good to have options.
So do you have like advisors helping you with this setup and everything, or are you planning part of the budget to go to like lawyers or anything like that with the
So okay, hold on, let me actually, just so that I could speak from having the budget right in front of me. So in terms of like advisors, I don't have anybody on our payroll intended as, I don't have any individual in mind who I intend to pay as an advisor at the moment. I do informally have a number of advisors, Wouter from SCS, Amy, previously from the Foundation's ComDev team, Long for Wisdom and Peyton, even, you and Seth. So I have been consulting many, many people on many aspects of the core unit thing, how it operates, things to look out for, wisdom that I could steal for myself. And so, yeah, in that sense, I've been very communicative, trying to do this thing right. But in terms of what's actually on our budget after we launch, we have a $50,000 contingency buffer that we can use towards legal expenses should they come up, should we need a legal advisor, et cetera, et cetera. We have 50,000, and these are annual numbers, 50,000 earmarked for professional services. That's primarily going to be paying Accountable for their services. But beyond that, nothing. And then outside of that, there's nothing budgeted for any additional advisors. So if we do if we do want to bring on advisors, you can look out for a budget modification that would be coupled with that.
Makes sense. So going back to the mandate, your team kind of proposed stakeholder registries for specifically internal use.
Mm-hmm.
how will you basically handle all of the data and deal with the privacy issues and security risk and that kind of stuff?
Very, very good question. So I am not a top tier professional and full of knowledge about data privacy. And so one of the requirements for the engagement lead role is that you have some background in data privacy or knowledge or, formal understanding of the details around data privacy. And with that, our intention is to create, is to follow the top tier standards around data privacy. And so we're gonna, do our best to have a really, really tight set of process and things that regulate our ability to use these lists, basically. But speaking from right now, I personally don't know the granular details, but I definitely know that it's top of mind.
In terms of all of the holes and needs that you're trying to fill, do you plan to do any user research or any reaching out or surveys or anything like that in terms of trying to glean what type of information would be most helpful for different types of users? Or how do you kind of figure out where those needs lie?
Yeah, I think one advantage that we have is between myself and Artem, we both vote on MKR proposals. We're both MKR voters, so we both inherently kind of know what the information at least MKR voters need. But obviously, with anything that we're producing, there has to be some level of feedback cycle, and so if you're kind of watching this and you're trying to learn how to, I guess, do things better yourself with the projects that you might be working on, feedback is freaking awesome. No matter what, even if it's horrible, straightforward, and mean, it's still good. You just got to stomach it and take a breath, because ultimately feedback tells you exactly what Jerry was saying. What are the gaps that we're not realizing exist, right? And so with Maker Relay, we already built out, even before GovComms, a feedback channel for it. So we have a survey that I think we have to redo and reset and kind of reconfigure once GovComms passes, if it passes. But so for each thing that we do, we are seeking feedback for sure. And then that's beyond the role of the engagement lead that I spoke about. So the engagement lead takes it even a step further and doesn't necessarily look for feedback on just our projects, but on things in general. Well, there's going to be a specific quarterly project that is associated with that role. But it's still to be defined. So it's hard to say right now. But the idea is, yes, we're looking for feedback. We're actively hunting for it, and we're actively trying to create actionable items as a result of the feedback that we're going to be gathering.
Yeah, like Artem mentioned in the chat, a good example of that is the poll.
Yes.
The transcription for different calls. I would agree that is a good example.
Yeah, precisely. And also, there's even another example. A few weeks ago, I posted some thoughts on how MakerDAO should use press releases. And of course, we could have just gone and assumed a certain way, but and just went off and did it, from the start. But instead, obviously, the wisest way to approach this is to put it out in the open, because press releases, believe it or not, are used in a variety of different ways. And so there's no obvious one way that we should use them. And a part of getting to know what our org likes and should use them for is having that feedback, having that discussion, even before we start a project. So I guess that's another distinction that we can make. So there's feedback on projects that exist. There's feedback on projects that we are in the conceptual phase, and then there's feedback on just whatever the landscape in general, not necessarily limited to our own team's projects. So those are kind of the three ways that I think about the feedback that we're going to be hunting.
Awesome. Well, we are getting close to the top of the hour, so I want to pause for a moment and see if anybody listening has any questions they'd like to come in to ask David or.
Wow, I've satisfied Paper Imperium. I'm happy. When Moon? Later tonight, probably.
Depends what time zone, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've kind of come to the end of my curiosities. But where can people find you if they want to reach out to ask you something personally or chat?
Sure. So I am David, period, UTRO, everywhere. Actually on Twitter, I'm just David Utro. You could lose the period. But on Rocket Chat, I'm David.Utro. On the Maker Forum, I believe I'm David.U. You'll usually see my face in my avatar. So yeah, also you can email me at david.utro@gmail.com. Yeah, happy to speak with people. If you're interested in that engagement lead position, hit me up, especially a positive if you are not a white male. We're looking for some more diversity. And so, yeah, reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you, David. This was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, I appreciate everybody that voted, everybody that didn't vote. And ultimately, I really just want to thank the community for giving me this opportunity. This is kind of like really, really, really freaking cool to be able to launch an independent team funded by a DAO. And so I'm looking forward to doing my absolute best as a facilitator. And yeah, thank you. Thank you to the community for showing faith in me, for showing faith in our vision, and hopefully we can deliver.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, likewise.
See
Well, with
everyone.
that, thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining.